Hello and welcome to Talk Local on Rogers TV. I'm Greg Mercer and I'm glad you could join us. We're going to spend most of our time tonight looking at the broad issue of poverty in our region. We'll examine the idea that having low income is really a health issue, and we'll ask the food bank in Cambridge about the pressures they're facing, and we'll chat with a local homeless advocate who's calling for changes to the way we think about public housing. But first, we're going to start tonight by looking at this petition that's calling for the Schneider's Flat conservation area to become a leash-free zone for dogs. So we're joined now by Dave Schultz. He's the spokesman for the Grand River Conservation Authority, and he's going to help us understand this.
Good evening.
Hey, thanks for coming, Dave.
Nice to be here.
So some people might be surprised to learn that the Schneider's Flats, that popular spot, is in fact, you must have a dog on a leash. It is not a leash-free zone.
That's right. Like all other conservation areas owned by the Grand River Conservation Authority, there's a provincial regulation that says you can have dogs on the property, but they have to be on a leash less than 2 meters long. Mm-hmm. And Schneider's Flats is an area that we've been developing for about 35 years into a natural area, a refuge for a lot of species at risk and endangered species that don't have a lot of other places to live in our area. But it's right on the edge of the city, and over the years, people have gone out there with their dogs. They call it Dogtopia. They love it because the dogs can run free and they can go in the undergrowth under the trees and through the fields. And there's some former gravel pits that are ponds now, and the dogs love to splash around in there. And so the people that own dogs and like to let their dogs run loose think it's just the best place for them to take their dogs, much better than the municipal dog parks in the area.
But it is. You have to have a dog on a leash. But what's changed lately? Because suddenly it's being enforced, or maybe that's not a sudden thing.
Well, the rule has always been there.
Okay.
The signs have always been there.
Okay.
Enforcement is difficult for us because this area is overseen by staff who run other of our properties. For example, the staff that run the Laurel Creek property in Waterloo. And they also run one of our dams, and they have other duties and flood control and all this kind of stuff. So it's difficult for them, obviously they can't be there 7 days a week, so they do try to get out. But it's just one of those things that if the enforcement is lax, then some people will try to find a way around the rules to do what they want to do. So, but in the over the last couple of years, we've put a lot of effort into it with a lot of community support in tree planting and developing trails. So it's become a more popular area for both dog walkers and non-dog walkers. And we found in the last couple of years in particular that we've started to have some issues around the dogs.
And what is the issue with that? What's the concern? What's the problem with letting a dog run?
Well, the primary concern revolves around what we're trying to do with that area. So if you go back about 40 years when we acquired the property, it had been farmland, and then we acquired it and we worked out a deal with a gravel company. They extracted some gravel from the area, but they dug those ponds in a particular way to serve as habitat for fish. So when the river floods in the spring, the fish get into the ponds. They use that as a place to breed.
Right, okay.
The fish grow up, and when it floods again the next spring, the fish get into the river. It's a natural process, but there's not many places left like that in the watershed where fish can breed like that in these ponds along the river or wetlands along the river. So we set out to develop a natural area for fish, and then we've been planting trees, we've been managing the grasslands, all of this kind of stuff to develop a habitat area for birds and mammals and all these animals. And that's what we've been doing with the property for 30 years. Now, the problem with dogs is if they're on a leash and they're walking down the trail with their owner, then the area that the dogs get into is basically 4 meters wide.
Right.
2 on either side of the trail, the length of the leash. But if the dogs are running loose and they're getting into the areas under the trees, the tree canopy, or they're getting into the fields and the meadows, they could be interfering with some of these animals we're trying to encourage.
I see.
So there's some birds that nest in the grass. There's mammals that have their dens in these wooded areas. And just to sort of explain how it works, there's a really interesting YouTube video. It shows somebody fixed a GoPro camera to the back of the dog. So it's really entertaining.
And this is at Schneider's Flats?
At Schneider's Flats.
Right.
So it shows the dog scampering around and having a grand old time. And then there's a slogan that comes on the screen. It says, "Hunting time."
Okay.
So there's this dog rooting around at the base of a tree with another dog and just doing what dogs do, which is hunt. Well, that's what we don't want to happen. We don't want to see dogs hunting there. And later on in the video, you see the dog joining a whole bunch of other dogs in the ponds, and they're having a grand old time, and they're chasing sticks and frisbees and getting wet and cooling down. And this is what people tell us they really enjoy about that. But the problem is that the areas where the dogs are is also, that's the area where the fish like to have their nests,
Right.
where they feed, because it's shallow and there's more plant growth in those areas. And so they're in exactly the area where we don't want them to be. And to be fair, I have to say the same thing about people that go swimming there. They're doing exactly the same thing. They're disturbing this habitat. And we don't like that either.
Right. But if a dog is found off leash, the owner can face a fine. Is that correct now?
That's right. This is a provincial regulation, so it's enforced under the Provincial Offences Act, much like a parking ticket would be, for example. So our guys are authorized to write tickets, and they hand the person a ticket, and it's a $95 fine. They obviously have the right to try and fight it in court, but it goes through the same process as any other provincial offense.
Right. And this petition that's trying to make an exception to Snyder's Flats and make it a leash-free zone, does it have any chance of changing the Conservation Authority's mind?
Well, as I understand it, this petition, and a couple of people are going to come speak to the petition at our board meeting on June 27th. And of course, it's always up to the board to decide what our policies are going to be. But if you look at the history of what we tried to do with this area, if you look at the way we enforce, or the way that this policy applies to all of our conservation areas, not just Snyder's Flats, you know, it makes it difficult to see that there would be a change, although, you know, you can never say never in a situation like this.
So for people to say, well, we've always done it, that isn't good enough. That doesn't work here.
Yeah, you know, we haven't even talked about the other element of it too, is many of the emails and phone calls I've received have been from people. They say, you know, I'm a responsible dog owner. My dog listens to me.
Right.
My dog doesn't get in fights. It
Right.
doesn't bother other people. But the problem is that there are dogs there that do those things. We've had reports of dog fights. I had a phone call from a woman who said her dog got into a fight with two larger dogs. It was
Okay.
not good. One of the owners ended up beating the dog with a stick.
Right.
His own dog with a stick to
Wow.
get it to stop.
Okay.
We've had reports of people being bitten. We actually had a dog fatality at the property a few years ago.
Really?
Yeah, there's a culvert that attaches one of these ponds to the river. The dog was in the area around this culvert, got stuck in it and drowned. And so, you know, if you talk about this human element on top of the natural element, people who feel intimidated by off-leash dogs, if they're out there with children, you know, maybe the dog's just being friendly, but the person on the receiving end doesn't always see it that way.
Right.
So we're trying to build a space where everybody can be happy, not just the dog walkers. So we want to make sure that if the dogs are unleashed, then the other people can enjoy it as well.
Well, we'll have to leave it at that. But thanks for coming in, Dave, and we
Thanks very much.
appreciate your time. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Talk Local, where we're focusing much of tonight's show on poverty in our region, and we're pleased now to welcome Pat Singleton. She's the Executive Director of the Cambridge Self-Help Food Bank, and she's going to help us understand some of the demands that her agency is seeing. So Pat, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Greg, for having me.
First, maybe just give people a broad sense of the level of need that you're seeing now at the food bank.
Okay. So at the Cambridge Self-Help Food Bank, we're part of sort of something called Waterloo Region Share. So that's our food bank and the food bank of Waterloo Region. And then within us are 100 different food programs. So that could be meal programs, it could be shelter programs,
Okay.
and then a huge part of it is emergency food assistance.
I see.
So at our food bank in Cambridge, we're maybe a wee bit different from some food banks, but we would offer a number of programs beside the food programs that our hope would work with families to self-reliance, whatever that might look like for them.
What is the level of need now? Do we have a sense of is it growing? Is it changing? Where is that at?
So the need in 2008, 2009 really spiked.
Okay.
And so we're down a little from them then, but oh boy, it was a huge increase. I don't, certainly at that time we had seemed to have more seniors coming, and so that hasn't leveled off a whole lot.
Okay.
Certainly families with children, over 800 children under the age of 18 a month we feed.
Wow.
But I think and I'm not sure why I seem to notice that, but often more families that have an individual that has a life-threatening illness.
Really?
And so that brings another bulk of problems along with just the food need, besides the food need.
Is the idea that their resources are being stretched because of that illness? Is that what you
I think
Yeah.
well, their resources, what they have left,
Okay.
has certainly been stretched. If they're waiting to have disability approved, that doesn't happen overnight. And so, family helps out, I think, in some cases the best they can. If there isn't family that can help, it's not a matter of just sitting down and, maybe you can't even make a sandwich.
Right.
And if you don't have the things for the sandwich, but you need, what kind of nutritious, healthy food do we have that we can give you? The cost of something like Booster and Sure is very expensive.
Okay.
And so if your income or your income is really limited, those things are almost impossible to purchase.
What about the idea of people who we often call the working poor,
Yeah.
folks with jobs, but the pay is so low
Yeah.
that they don't have enough to make ends meet? And I imagine they are a good chunk of the
Yeah.
people you're helping. What are you seeing from them? What are they telling you? What's their situation?
I think that number, I think people seem surprised when we say, 23% of the people who use the food bank have a form of income. But certainly if you're making 10 or 12, well now it's $11 or $12 an hour. And then you try and figure your rent out of that. If you have childcare, how do you get to your job? By the time you've done all those things, you're certainly limited in what money is left to purchase food with. And then if you have children, and not being critical of the school system, but children are only to bring nutritious things for lunch.
Right.
I don't know how often I will hear a mom say, or our staff will say, another mom said today, I kept my kids home because I didn't have something nutritious, which then is another whole set of problems because now the child's missed school, maybe will miss school maybe 3 times that month. So then we wonder why when we're hitting grade 8, grade 9, we have truancy issues. So I think people who donate to the food bank try to donate the best they can. Certainly at this time of the year, we hope some folks have maybe planted some rows in their garden.
Right.
We have a couple of community gardens,
Okay.
but certainly not enough to sustain the number of families we're helping in a month.
But that school issue is an interesting one. It's an example of a policy that's probably well-intentioned.
Yeah.
They may not be realizing some of the consequences of
Yeah.
that. And you're hearing that often.
Oh yes, yeah. And I think then we thought, well, maybe one of our staff, she said, I thought, why don't I send some things with my kids in their lunch?
Okay.
But then they can't do that because the kids aren't allowed to share, and not because maybe
Didn't know that.
your child would eat something that there was an allergy
I
to.
see.
And I know those things are all meant well, but how are we helping the mom or the dad that doesn't have the 3 nutritious snacks a day?
What impact are you seeing in terms of maybe new Canadians who are coming in, or people who are new? Are they some of the folks that you're helping?
Yeah, certainly they are. And so sometimes along with that comes a different food need than what, so we would now use more basmati rice than we did before.
Okay.
Certain flours we would use that would be different than we did, say, 10 years ago. And so trying to work within, and even if looking at dietary restrictions, I think sometimes we say, well, people, you ought to be grateful for what you have. But if it doesn't fit within, your specific culture or your diet because you're lactose intolerant or you have whatever, it could be diabetes or those kind of things. I mean, we try to do the best we can with the food we get and trying to encourage people, when you're shopping, think about what you like or think about what is needed in your diet and how can we better share that around.
And how is the Cambridge Food Bank doing in terms of donations? Where are you folks at? Is the cupboard full? Can you always use more donations?
Yeah. I mean, we certainly can always use donations. Right. Somebody said today, oh boy, we need pasta sauce.
Okay.
I mean, as we get into the summer, donations quite drop off. Churches who are very generous, maybe 3 churches now meet in one building, whereas all 3 churches might have done a donation before. Schools are closed, so they aren't doing school drives. I mean, people go away on holidays, and so maybe they're donating in Huntsville as opposed to donating in Cambridge,
I see.
which is great for Huntsville. But I think all those the summer. When we finish the Easter food drive and people go, oh my goodness, you've got so much food, which is true. But then we say, but that now needs to last us till we start the Thanksgiving food drive.
Wow.
So
if people want to help, what should they do? Where do they go?
I mean, certainly our website, we have listed on our website as our most needed items. I can't think of anything people could donate that we wouldn't use. Personal care products.
Okay.
Often people don't think about those kind of things, but we have a street outreach worker, and so Jess uses a lot of items for her participants. Anything that your family would use, probably one of our families would.
I see. And that website is?
www.cambridgefoodbank.on.ca.
Okay. All right, well, we'll have to leave it at that, Pat. I wish we had more time, but thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
All right. You're watching Talk Local. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Talk Local on Rogers TV, where we're tonight continuing our look at poverty in Waterloo Region. We're going to switch gears a bit now and welcome Charles Nichols. He's a local homelessness advocate, and I'm glad you could be here, Charles.
Thank you.
Thanks. So first, we talk about homelessness, and we talk about it within Waterloo Region. Is there some way of giving people at home a sense of how widespread of an issue this is here?
Well, a lot wider than they might realize.
Okay.
We have the Charles Street Hostel, so that's for men. We have Mary's Place. We have the Bridges in Cambridge. We have the Cold program in KW. And then there are people who don't use any of those programs.
Right.
We call them the hidden homeless. So they might be crashing with friends or in an abandoned building or camping, for lack of a better word. So our numbers are always going to be a little inexact. I can tell you that over the winter, at Out of the Cold, they had more people than had mattresses to put them on.
Wow. So
Okay, we were
the demand
overflowing.
is overwhelming the services.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's, it's been coming. We knew it would come sooner or later, that our numbers would outstretch our ability. But part of the problem is we kept hoping that all these services would be temporary.
Right. Do we know why it seems to be growing?
Income,
Okay.
lack of not enough affordable housing being built,
Okay.
the outrageous amounts that are out there for rent. That's kind of the tip of the iceberg. That's where you start.
Okay. You mentioned housing, and I want to ask you about this idea of housing first. We hear this idea.
Okay.
Can you walk people through what that means?
Okay.
Housing first. How does it work, and what is it?
Okay. It's a great name for the program because it's literally what it is what it says it is.
Okay.
Okay, you build the housing first, you put the people in the housing first,
Right.
and then you take care of the rest of their problems. Okay? It has been demonstrated that you immediately have better health outcomes.
Okay.
You immediately, because it's affordable, they have more money to do other things with. There's a program within the Housing First for mental health. The pilot is called At Home Chez Soi, I believe it is in French.
Okay.
And I just read a report that says they saved the healthcare system more than $2 for every dollar they invest in housing. Think about that. We're saving twice as much as we're investing. What can we do with that extra money in the healthcare budget? Without having to add the budget for the Ministry of Health, we just build housing.
So to people who say, oh, we can't afford this, you're saying, well, it actually saves us money.
I have a word for that. We can't use it on television.
Is this happening locally? Are there Housing First projects in our region, or is this happening in Ontario?
Housing First is the official policy of the region.
Okay.
And so we're taking that attitude, making it work.
Okay.
Okay, finding property to build on, finding the people that will build, and getting the investment from the other governments
Right.
and the rest of the community. That seems to be a bit of the stumbling block from what I'm seeing right now.
Okay.
Because it's not just the government writes a check and suddenly there's an apartment building there.
Right.
Okay, there's quite a bit more to it. You always end up with a mortgage. Okay, because the government will kick in a certain percentage. Well, would it be nice if these people who decide to provide houses could get a very low income very low interest mortgage from the banks. When we look at, say, youth, the Housing First model has to be tweaked a bit because youth have a different set of needs.
Right.
You can't just plop somebody who's 17, 18, 19 into an apartment and expect they know what to do.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Right.
And maybe they're not set up to live alone. You know, maybe that's just not their personality. For someone with a disability like myself, I cannot live alone anymore. Even if I had the income to live alone, I just can't do it. I can no longer operate my stove. So I'm sure I'm not the only one out there who cannot cook. You know, so all that needs to be taken care of. I'm sure seniors need a different type of approach. And what I've clued into recently, and as long as I've been at this, and I've been doing advocacy for like 13 years now,
Right.
that along the way to getting the housing and the higher and the better incomes, we need a change in attitude and creative ideas. So where are those going to come from? So that has become the focus of Homeless Awareness Week now, is to change the attitudes. So as well as making people aware that homelessness exists,
Right.
that there are people living on the edge of dying, to, okay, let's take a different view of this. Let's start thinking differently.
Are you starting to see those attitudes change?
Depends who you talk to.
Okay.
You know, you've already talked about how little attention was paid during the election. I helped facilitate a couple of all candidates meetings, and wasn't too thrilled with the turnout. Wasn't overly thrilled with the answers I was getting from the politicians I was hearing. And so, is there going to be the change of attitude in Queen's Park? I'm not convinced yet.
I'm going to ask you, you could speak with some authority on the subject a little bit because you have walked in homeless
Oh, I've
people's
been
shoes.
there.
You've been there.
A few
Can I
times.
ask you a little bit about that?
This is supposed to be a PG-rated show, or G? It's
Family show.
Family show. Well, then there's stuff I cannot tell you.
Okay.
It is as close to hell on earth as I think anybody should ever have to come to. I don't want to compare it to what goes on in other parts of the world, because it doesn't. But I was fortunate enough that it did not last long at any one time. But the day before I turned 19, I was forced to leave home,
Okay.
my parents' house. How that came about is a god-awful long story. But I was an angry kid. I deserve some discipline. Did I deserve to be out of the house? It's debatable. And they're not here. They're passed away. They can't defend themselves, so let's leave it be there. But that experience of suddenly not having housing. I spent part of my 19th birthday. In fact, the moment I turned exactly 19 years of age, I was under the Huron Street Bridge in Stratford in March.
Wow.
It's cold in March. You might not have noticed it, but it gets chilly. And, you know, I've been periodically on the street, usually because I didn't have the money anymore to pay the rent, or a relationship had broken down. And let's face it, when a couple breaks up, one or the other is moving out. And if you don't have a place to go, well, where do you go?
Do you think that experience has helped you be a better advocate for the homeless? Because you've been homeless.
I try to make it help. I try to use my experience. I firmly believe in making, you know, try to make some good come out of every experience. But what got me into advocacy, wasn't my experience. I was in a training placement in 2001, this summer, and I met a little girl who lived downstairs from me.
Okay.
Now, I'm guessing she's about 2 because she was learning to talk, okay? And I realized that her and her single mother, their lives are being totally shaped by poverty and homelessness. And as much as I just wanted to get a job, forget about the whole thing, walk away, I couldn't do it. I just could not do it because this little girl needed somebody fighting for her. And I decided if I can make a difference, I would. At the time, we were creating the community's first homelessness plan, and there were very few people around the table who actually walked the walk, who lived the life, as I say it. And so I stayed. I got a bit of experience in committees and doing advocacy, started doing a lot more of the writing, and eventually decided that I need to start something outside of the structures that already existed, that went directly to directly to people out there. Because if it's just Linda and me and the others who are professionals or semi-professional advocates, we're not going to get it done. It's got to be Canadians, Ontarians, as a whole, saying, we care, enough is enough, let's end this.
Well, we're going to go to break in a minute. We did have a caller phone in with a question to the producer to put to you, and a lady by the name of Marion up in Waterloo, she wants to know what kinds of things can she do to help? Are there specific things that she can donate? Do you have a quick answer to that?
Money is good.
Okay.
Food is good. Time. It
Like volunteer,
depends.
you mean?
Volunteer.
Yep.
What are you good at? If you tell me what you're good at, I'll find a place to put you. So there's lots of need. What is your niche in that? What do you have to offer? And we'll figure out where to put you. Call one of the previous guests. I know with what I do, I can use volunteers as well.
Okay. We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back. We'll talk more with Charles.
Okay.
You're watching Talk Local on Rogers TV. Welcome back to Talk Local, where we will spend our final segment tonight on poverty in Waterloo Region with homelessness advocate Charles Nichols. So Charles, thanks again for staying with us. And again, I want to get back to this issue that we talked in the last segment, of housing first.
Yeah.
And it might seem counterintuitive to some people that you give someone who's homeless their own apartment, and you're saying that can actually save society money. Can you explain how that works?
Big time. Look at what it costs, what we're spending to maintain them when they're homeless. Okay. I think the shelters system cost us $7 billion or so last year as a nation. That's a huge amount of money. If someone who's homeless needs medical care, since we don't have doctors, we go to the hospital. The ER is the most expensive part in the hospital. If you need an ambulance, somebody calls an ambulance. My friend out calls that the $500 cab ride. If you do call 911, it's not just the ambulance that comes, the police, the fire, they all show up, and that's costing money.
It's an expensive phone call. Right?
Yeah, what about the cost to just lack of opportunity, lack of their own being able to be a part of our society and contribute? When we hear cost, we think dollars.
Right.
Okay, the facts are out there. The research has been done that is less expensive in dollars and cents to build the housing and put someone in there than it is to just leave them on the street. Okay, and then there's a cost to the person
Right.
and to society in the sense of their opportunity, their involvement. For all we know, the next Stephen Hawking is begging for change on King and Queen Street. And we don't know it. And he doesn't have the opportunity to build those skills and explore his potential because he's poor.
I want to ask you about this idea of housing people who are homeless.
Yeah.
That's only one part of the equation. It's the
Right.
first step, you're saying.
Right.
So what do we do about, so you house somebody, what do you do about some of the root causes of homelessness, some of the addiction or mental health that we often hear about?
Well, I haven't seen a health situation that could not be improved. Certainly we can improve the mental health system, get greater access. It will take investment, no two ways about it. We can create better addictions treatment programs and facilities. It will take investment. We can look at early intervention so people do not become homeless. It will take investment. Remember, I'm not saying expense. Investment.
You're saying the money comes back to society, to government eventually.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
What's the ultimate goal of, say, of a housing first project? Do people graduate from it? Where do you hope it goes?
Well, the idea of graduating from it would be transitional housing,
Okay.
which is one type of housing.
Right.
But where does it go? It goes to someone gaining their independence.
Okay.
having a chance maybe to get back to go to school if that's what is right for them. But to come in off the street, regain your health, your independence, have an income where you can afford to eat and not need the food bank. Wouldn't that be lovely to not need what Pat does? Okay? Food banks and soup kitchens were supposed to be a temporary emergency measure. They become a way of life. Our society's become dependent on them because we haven't fixed the basic problem that people are not making enough money to keep a roof over their head, feed their kids, feed themselves, and actually live. We're barely surviving.
I wish we had more time to talk about
Me
this,
too.
Charles, but I appreciate you coming in and being such an eloquent speaker about this subject, and hope some people at home learned a few things, so thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're all out of time. You're watching Talk Local, and we will be back next week. Thanks for watching. Yeah, sorry that